Charles, take it away.
All right. Can you hear me, Sheila?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, good morning. It's been a pleasure to participate in this all day. I've been amazed at the quality of the speakers, and it's really been insightful. And so I think what I have to say today will leverage very well with what the audience has heard today. So I've already spoken with Dominic, and I'm operating off of an iPad, so he'll be will handle my deck for me. So I'll just ask you when to turn, Dominic. The other thing I'd like to say, I'd like to thank Sheila for her leadership with USEA over this past year. I think that she's done an outstanding job, and she and also Vicki Bailey as our chair of the board. I do want to thank them. Um, I also want to point out that I really did enjoy the last speaker. I was so engaging, and I agree with everything that he was saying, and have no problem with the last statement that he added. But I'd be remiss if I didn't add my own to that, and that is that um, I think it's never a question of what you cannot do. I think it is a question of what you're willing to do and what you're willing to commit to do. And I think that's not only a message for us as individuals, I think that is a message for us as it relates to policy, and it relates to us as a nation and how we move forward and how we move forward globally, quite honestly. And I say that because it's really interesting being a part of this organization, because its former director, Barry Worthington, who I have nothing but the fondest memories of, was the person who brought me into the electric utility industry 36 years ago as an intern with Houston Lighting and Power. And so, I know he's looking down upon us today, and hopefully looking down upon me as someone who he mentored and had a very significant impact on their lives. Coming into today, one of the things that I asked you, okay, what do you want me to talk about? She said, well, whatever whatever you'd like to talk about, what's going on in the industry right now. And so that's what I thought I'd do. And the way I want to do that is talk about it in context of AEP. And as you see here on the title page, is AEP, an American Utility in Transition. And while I'm going to talk about AEP, I don't believe that the strategy and the current priorities of AEP are unique to AEP. I think if you were to look across the electric utility industry, and I believe that Tom Kuhn would validate this, that if you look across the electric utility industry, the things that I'll just kind of glance over today are very common throughout the industry. So Dominic, could you change? Next slide, please. So first of all, just a quick fact on AEP, one of the largest utilities in the country. We have 5.5 million customers. That's in 11 states, and in those 11 regulated states, two of them they have retail competition. We're in 35 states because we have a fairly robust independent power company that is really active in the renewable space, with significant amount of wind, solar, and beginning to even develop storage. And as you can see, we have 30,000 megawatts of diverse generation. And one of the things that we're really proud of is that we declared that we're going to reach net zero by 2050, like many utilities have. And again, it's a large company, $14.9 billion in annual revenues. Next one, Dominic. So in speaking to AEP's commitment to a clean future, and again, this is not unique to AEP. In 2020, we were at a 74% reduction in carbon emissions when compared to 2000, and we are on target to be at 80% below that number by 2030. And it's really interesting when we talk about our net zero goal, because originally AEP was very reticent to make that commitment, because being a very strong engineering company, we really wanted clear line of sight to how we get to that zero emission by 2050. It wasn't something we just wanted to say. It was something that we wanted to make sure that we had a clear path to it. And as we can move forward, we really dug into it, and we believe that such a path is feasible. Next slide, Dominic. So for us, the goal to net zero, what we did was we recently completed a climate impact analysis, and we looked at various scenarios of how does the company get to net zero. And what was really interesting, just really looking at our integrated resource plans that were currently on file and what we were forecasting for the company, was that we were headed to a 90 plus percentage reduction in carbon emissions, just on our own volition, without stepping up and doing much more. That was just a path that we were headed on, based on technology and really just economics. And so we undertook this study, and it validated it, and also gave us an opportunity to look at some things that we could do to accelerate. At the end of the day, you end up at the same place, and that is about, we say, net zero by 2050. And quite candidly, the net zero by 2050 also includes buying some environmental credits, because we can't quite get 100% there perfectly. We can get very close. And in order for us to get there, make no mistake about it, there's a lot of things that have to happen. And we put some big disclaimers there. And I think across the industry, when you look, the sincere commitment to reaching net zero by 2050 is there. That commitment is there for our customers. It's there for the world as we attack this really important and significant issue. But we also realize, as our last speaker pointed out, that there are laws of physics and engineering that also come into play. So we do believe that we can get there, but there's going to have to be some significant things that happen on the technology front, and also significant policy adjustments and assistance in getting us there. But again, we are very confident that we can get there. And then the last thing I'd like to say is, as we thought about net zero by 2050, the other thing that's become really, I would say, a pillar in utility thinking is this idea of a just transition. AEP historically was a tremendous user of coal. In fact, when I became part of the company in 2000, I was part of a merger between CSW and AEP. And at that time, we were the largest burner of coal in the entire Western Hemisphere. And of course, as evidenced by our net road to zero, our road to net zero, that is something that is changing dramatically. But being in those communities, and one of the things why we were such a big coal burner was that our plants were very close to the sources. They were on the rivers, and many of these plants are in the heart of our service territory. And so one of the things that we've observed as we migrate from coal is the impact that this shift is having on many of those communities. And so one of the things that we're committed to, and I know other utilities are, who have significant fossil presence in their fleet, is what do we do to make sure that those communities are positively impacted? And that is one thing that I appreciate about the Biden proposals, that the communities are not forgotten and left behind. Because as we make this shift to green energy, there are many opportunities, but there are also many challenges that we lift all of society as we make this change. Dominique, next slide. So how's AEP going to do it? We're going to be investing in renewables throughout our entire service territory. We'll be in the interim. We'll be optimizing our existing generation fleet, and that really gets to the point that I was making earlier. Is that we embrace renewables. We recognize that renewables um, are the future. We also recognize that dispatchable energy is also critically important as we make this transition, and how we effectively make this transition in a manner that optimizes both cost and reliability and resiliency. That's really the kind of the tough nut to crack. And that's something that we have to keep our eye on, and where you can't ignore physics and you can't ignore economics. And I want to emphasize to our participants, particularly in the environmental community, or those who are obviously committed to getting to this green energy future as quickly as possible. Make no mistake about it. We are 100% committed to that. um, I just want to make clear that it is really important that we keep in mind the resilience of the system, reliability of the system, and ultimately the cost um, of making this shift. And I can give you a very practical example. If you're AEP and you made a huge commitment to your coal fleet, and you made a commitment to being environmentally responsible and compliant with regulation. At AEP, we made significant investments in our coal fleet to meet uh, SO2, mercury, and all the various EPA rules that came along. And what that did was it put a very significant amount of new capital investment in our fleet. And while we know that we have to transition out of those fleets, I always give the analogy when I'm talking to someone, it's kind of like having an old car. Yep, I do want a new car. But the other thing I have to keep in mind is that if I have a certain amount of money, and that money is our customers' money and the economic viability of the communities that we serve, if that vehicle, I have to make a major repair to it, I may need to extend the life of that vehicle some way in order to make the transition to my new vehicle. How we do that in a way that is as green as possible, again, that's I believe, the nut that we are going to have to crack, because it is no doubt that there will be more electrification. The electrification of the transportation sector will require much from the electric utility industry, and we certainly have to transition to be able to accommodate that. Dominic, next slide. Right now, we have a plan that we've shared with Wall Street. It's called our Future Forward Initiative. And our intent is to add over 16,600 megawatts to be precise, of regulated renewable energy on our system um, between now and 2030. And what this will do is it will bring AEP's renewable capacity to uh, right at 50% of our total generating capacity by 2030. And remember, this was a company that was, again, in the year 2000, was the largest um, burner of coal in the Western Hemisphere. Next slide, please. So here you just see a visual of what is going to happen in transforming our fleet. And you can see the huge shift from coal to other sources. And again, it's just a visual representation of where we're headed. And when we think about the drivers here, first of all, it is the societal view of that is in our commitment to society to recognize that climate change is real and that we need to weigh in and be a part of the solution. Two is economics. The economics of renewables continue to improve. And when you look at the relative economics of renewable facilities compared to the ongoing O&M and cost of many of our coal assets, those renewables really compare very well. We just brought in the first phase of 1,000 megawatt wind farm in Oklahoma. It's a project that's shared between Public Service Oklahoma and Southwest Electric Power Company, and we will bring that asset online and actually lower costs for customers. And that's one of the great potentials that renewables can bring to our fleet, particularly as we continue to build out transmission. Next slide. Um, this is also being driven not simply by economics, but by ESG. And I'm going to put a big circle around the E. The expectations around environmental responsiveness and responsibility is at the forefront of investors. And like I said, AEP had always been very dedicated to moving rapidly toward a greener future in terms of our supply. But what we did was we had some one-off conversations with investors just to test what level would they be satisfied with. And it became crystal clear to us that they would not be satisfied with anything less than that zero commitment by 2050. So while we were headed in that direction, the fact that our investors doubled down on their commitment and their expectation um, as a shareholder that we make that commitment, it really helped us get the right amount of emphasis and focus there. I already mentioned our view of just transition, and that's the S piece. We do think the S piece is, of course, incredibly important and something that, and I'll mention that as I finish up here in a second, why we think that's so important. Next slide. So quickly, if you're given an updated electric utility industry, I'd be remiss if I did not point out Uri. I think that Winter Storm Uri, for a short period of time, it's given us some lasting conversations. But in the near term, there was a lot of finger pointing around what really happened. And if you were less a fan of renewables, it was because of renewables. If you were a huge renewable champion, it wasn't about renewables. And at the end of the day, the fact is that those winter conditions were such that everything failed. Renewables failed, nuclear plants failed, coal plants failed, our natural gas policy as it related to Texas and our availability of natural gas. When we think about the harmonization as gas becomes more integral to the delivery of electricity, the harmonization of natural gas delivery, not only to warm homes through the LDCs and to make sure that the industrial infrastructure keeps going, but also the ability to be able to supply electric utility plants uninterrupted. That's something that it's one of those things that we're going to have to definitely keep our eye on as we move forward, because gas will continue to play a role in the future of this transition to our green economy. We believe that you have to make improvements in capacity markets where they exist, or at least make sure that we reward those facilities that have certain attributes that may give us a level of reliability or dispatchability. And then the transmission, planning, and interconnection, whether it's FERC and our ability to move across seams, and to really leverage the entire country to help from a reliability perspective. And I have to a big shout out to Jim Robb and NERC, because NERC is really essential there, because they are the honest broker of reliability and resiliency. They are the ones who are not looking at it purely from an economic perspective or from their shareholder perspective. They're looking at it from a national resiliency and reliability perspective, and allowing NERC to lean in and to work with NERC in order to develop the most robust system is critically important. And then, of course, winterization is a no-brainer. That is definitely a takeaway that came from this effort. Next slide, Dominique. So I'm not going to go through these. I think that I covered them. And the bottom line is that we have to focus on transmission planning. You got to remember distribution is going to become a big role, going to play a big role in that. And that's an area that utilities are really focusing on as we think about distributed applications, as well as demand side management tools that really allow us to treat demand almost as a source. And then make no mistake about it that the entire grid is greening. And as I said before, and I just have to single them out because I just think that NERC is critically important to the overall reliability and resiliency of the grid as we all make this change. Next slide. Hey, I would be remiss if I didn't also, if you're thinking about electric utilities, and I think this is appropriate for most businesses, but I don't think sometimes electric utilities get full credit for the social awareness and the S in ESG, I guess I should say. I think our industry did a great job of transitioning for COVID, not only for our customers, or I guess I should say our employees, but also for our customers. And I think we learned a great deal there that is going to change it's really going to change the face of the office, like many businesses. I think that how we work will change. At AEP, we're going to look at a hybrid model where many of our workers will not work in the office as a way they have historically. And what that does is, I believe, from a recruiting perspective, it really gives us an opportunity to appeal more broadly to young people who will bring the talent that we need in order to be competitive in the future and to bring the kind of ideas into the company that we need to be successful. And then the other thing about, and I'll just call it 2020, is that you can't think about 2020 without thinking about COVID and also the social unrest of 2020. And I think the utilities have stepped up very well in that space, recognizing that beyond the protesting of treatment that may be inappropriate, and the whole issues of unconscious bias in the workplace and just generally in our society, that leaning in and trying to develop strategies for attracting these underutilized and these disengaged communities into our industry by creating opportunities for jobs and for partnerships is something that not only AEP is doing, but I'm very proud to say that when you look across the industry, it's fairly common. So I think that's a brief snapshot of where AEP is. And as I said at the outset, I think that is very representative of where the entire electric utility industry is. Maybe a little bit more focused on one than the other, but I think it is a true snapshot of where our industry is. So with that, I'll be quiet. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Charles, for that incredible overview and for dealing with the real world issues that you are confronted with all the time too. We really, really appreciate your input and just the total picture and the balancing of so many factors in such a complex world. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.